Last year was an incredible year for Lululemon. Not only did everyone find the renewed glory of working from home and being comfortable, but the likelihood of this continuing is very strong given the fact that we are looking at a scenario where working from home, being more casual, integrating with a family seems more like the norm. Lululemon also is on the forefront of a movement within global corporations, basically inserting themselves on the forefront of equality, racial issues, and trying to be a better global citizen. And there's nobody who really can address that more than Calvin McDonald, who is the chief executive officer of Lululemon, formerly of Sephora and of Sears. Calvin, I want to start with the pandemic. It seems like it crystallized and galvanized a lot of efforts about inclusion and racial inequality for companies, yours as well. How did that change the initiatives that you have?
As you mentioned, first of all, great to see you, Lisa. And it definitely, as we move through the year of 2020, there are a number of challenges that, as an organization, we were faced. Obviously, one with the closing of the stores and supporting our store teams from around the world, to then entering into the conversations of social injustice. And I just think it was a year of reflection, both on who we were being as an organization within our communities, as well as who we were being as an employer for our teams. And it just created a platform and an opportunity to challenge the decisions we were making and lean in and invest in ways in which we weren't necessarily prioritizing in the past.
Can you give us some examples of what those areas were?
No, absolutely. For us, it really started early on in the pandemic. We sort of established three guiding principles as an organization of who we wanted to be through the challenges that we were being faced with through the pandemic. And that was to, one, protect our teams. Second was to continue to balance our share of mind in managing the business in the moment, as well as thinking forward when we reopen the stores to get a quick start, and then finally investing into our future. And on the first one, supporting our teams, it really guided us to make industry-leading decisions to protect pay for our employees, which we did throughout the entire year. We continued to protect and support our manufacturing partners. We didn't cancel one order that we had committed to. We continued to pay our landlords, as well as we created relief funds for our employees, as well as our extended community, be our ambassador community. So a number of initiatives, we prioritized where we would invest and how we would support as a result of what our collective was facing.
Your shares were up more than 50% last year. And a lot of this had to do just with the fact that everyone went out and bought a pair of yoga pants and stayed in them for the whole year. There's also a question, though, going forward about how shareholders respond to these types of expenditures. I mean, do they welcome them? Do they see the financial potential benefit? Does it not matter to them because they see companies more as shareholders of the world?
I think I know from our shareholders, they recognize the importance of investing in our teams and our people and in our communities. The power, one of the powers of Lululemon is the brand, the strength of our community. It's at the core of where we invest, what's important, and that relationship of human connection is probably one of our most important assets and the things that we invest in. So if you truly believe that human connection in your community is core to the success of the brand, and that's both with our guests as well as with our employees, then you have to prioritize it and invest behind it. And that's what we do. That's what we did last year, and we'll continue to make those investments moving forward. And the reward for that is the success in the business, the strength of the brand, and the momentum that we've been able to experience.
There's a question. You had a number of conversations about race with your employees throughout the year. I'm wondering what was the most surprising thing you learned from those conversations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Early on last year, I started to have, one-on-one conversations, just myself with a collection of our employees from our BIPOC community. And through those, recognized the opportunity inside Lululemon. We have a purpose to elevate the world by realizing the full potential within every one of us. And I realized through those conversations that although there's a lot of good we are doing, we can do more. And there are challenges inside our business. And there are areas in which, even with the intent that we had, we needed to change what we were doing in order to really embrace inclusive culture at Lululemon. So for me, those conversations really led to our commitment, renewed commitment behind IDEA, which is our framework for inclusive diversity and equity in action, and has really driven a lot of the work that we did all of last year.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what some of those challenges were that you identified through these sessions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a good example is sort of the unintended consequence of words. So we would talk a lot about culture fit at Lululemon, in our hiring practices, inside the culture, and through those conversations, realizing how, one, that can create more of an insular culture than what we intend. It could lead to lack of diversity in how we hire and who we hire, or even how we recruit. And we pivoted and shifted. The real intent was the notion more behind culture add. And it's important that people have shared values. It's important that people believe in the purpose of what we're trying to achieve and the notion of well-being, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of exclusion. And we realized through those conversations how some of the words that we used to represent who we wanted to be, in fact, was not necessarily supporting who we are and who we want to be. So that's just one example of making sort of pivots and changes to just even how we describe our approach.
A lot of companies have also talked about how they've been trying to get more people of color, more women represented in their upper ranks. I know a big proportion of Lululemon senior executive, frankly, is women. But I'm wondering, on the racial aspect, how you've done on that particular initiative, getting more people represented at the upper ranks as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you mentioned, we're very proud of our gender equality at Lululemon. 77% of our workforce is women. 65% of the senior leadership team are women. Over 50% of VPs within the organization are women. And we've supported gender equality on pay for many years. We know we have an opportunity to represent a more diverse organization, building upon the diversity we have with gender. We have a commitment behind full pay equality, and we've achieved that in the U.S., where we get the data and can validate that, not only do we have pay equality across gender, but also across ethnicity. So that's one example where we want to hold ourselves accountable. And we're a global company, and in many markets, we can't collect the data easily that we can in other markets without a voluntary survey. So we've just completed a voluntary survey globally to really establish where we are from a diversity perspective so that we can share where we want to go. We're proud of much of what we've done, and we know we can do better. And that will be an informed decision. And the survey is just one example of how we can make more informed decisions of where we are and where we want to go as an organization.
Are there certain regions that are further along in that type of diversity high up in the ranks?
I think at this point, we have opportunity in many of our markets. And as we move globally, the diversity changes, where we might be considered more diverse in our APAC employee base relative to our North American, but there's other opportunities of diversity in that market. So we're really looking at the community and as a global citizen and defining who we want to be globally and within the communities we serve.
You said something that I want to pick up on, this idea of culture being both a positive usually for companies, saying we want to create a certain culture and bring our employees in so that we can perpetuate an image and also a vision, but also that culture can feel exclusive. And I'm wondering if the work from home movement has actually made it more difficult or less difficult to kind of engage with a number of different viewpoints, backgrounds, and the like.
Yeah, there have been a lot of There's been a lot of good and learning as a result of work from home, leveraging technology, and there's been some challenges in terms of that notion of human connection, creativity, coming together, spontaneity behind innovation. But in terms of just being in conversation, the breadth of conversation, I think it's been enhanced. I have conversations with a number of educators and leaders across the organization on a daily basis, from the comfort of my house, the comfort of their house, on a global scale that I don't think we would have had the practice of doing in the past. So I think in terms of being in conversation with a broad group of our employees on a number of topics, it has absolutely been enhanced in a practice that will continue moving forward as we continue to be in the conversation. And as well, it's allowed us to deliver a lot of our training. When our stores were closed and we continued to invest and pay our employees, we launched a number of online training programs, some related to idea and diversity, some related to mental well-being and their own resilience training. So it allowed us to do things that we otherwise might not have been able to do, leveraging the technology. That's the good, and we can hardly wait to get back to be with each other, because human connection is really core to the culture and what we thrive on.
So as people get back to the office, what are some of your goals in terms of how to broaden diversity further from here?
It's building upon the commitments we made, and some of them are, one, last year we invested in our idea teams on a global scale. We had leaders of idea, but we leaned in and increased that funding by over $5 million to make sure that we put more resources on the ground across the markets to support the initiatives. We invested in training. We set up employee-led feedback groups that allowed the conversation to continue. We've made commitments around improving the diversity of our teams, and that's both in how we lean in and develop the diversity and the diverse candidates we have within the organization, as well as how we recruit. And finally, using our social platform and our voice, which is something I think as a brand we started to do and have a real opportunity to lean in on the conversations more often, and share our point of view externally as well as internally.
So the concept of diversity is very broad by its nature, by definition, and there's certainly a question of race, there's certainly a question of gender. There's also this question, and this was from an audience member who is listening. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Siobhan Kelly-Bush, Talent Manager, Schneider Electric, UK and I. My question relates to multi-generation workforce. As we're all living and working longer, how can organisations create an inclusive culture to embrace all generations? Thank you.
So, Calvin, what's your response?
I think, to create an inclusive culture, by the very definition, you don't exclude either through race, through gender, or through age. So idea for us, the inclusiveness of our value and the culture we're trying to create by definition is really intended to be inclusive for all. So it's a commitment to this organization. It's how I hold myself accountable in the work we're in across a broad group of the employee base. So to me, it really is just rooted in the commitment, the priority, and how we see ourselves and what that inclusiveness is. And for Lululemon, it is everyone. Our purpose is to elevate the world by realizing the full potential within every one of us. And that cuts across gender, age, race, and that is who we want to be for the world. It's who we want to be for ourselves and our employees. And it's the commitment and the investments that we're making and where we put our focus.
This is kind of a sensitive question, but a lot of these issues are very sensitive. They're hard to talk about. People are not used to talking openly about age, about race, about gender inequalities. That actually probably more than some of the others. How do you engender a level of comfort, both for yourself and for your employees, in talking about this, when people can step on each other's toes and say things that really rub people the wrong way?
It's a great question. And I'll start with a position of myself last year. I had to go through my own, journey and learning to be comfortable to have the conversations around diversity, to have the confidence to be in conversation with a number of our teams and our educators from our BIPOC community, to have the confidence in the questions I'm asking, to have the sensitivity of the challenges that they face and the challenges that exist within the organization. So these are difficult conversations, and every individual owns their own journey to learn. It's not someone else's responsibility to teach you. You have to teach yourself. You have to invest to learn and understand and be in conversations. You have to read. You need to really reflect upon your views. You have to reflect upon your understanding, empathy, and listen. And listening is doing. And a lot of times we want to be in action. And I spent a lot of time last year to just listen, to understand, to reflect, and understand what I could do as a leader of this organization. And I'd encourage anybody to go on that journey for themselves as well. And then collectively, as we come together, to have the confidence to know, as a business, we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to move forward. And that's the intent that we manage it by.
How much is that a big part of the problem? That a lot of people, particularly in corporate spaces, do not talk about these sensitive issues because they are worried about the ramifications, and so people feel suffocated. In other words, how much is it that people think that the way to get around offending people is just to not talk about something, and that talking about it is actually probably the best remedy, albeit with certain safeguards around it?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a bit of an issue for some around fear. And my sense is we can't move forward if we don't move forward together. We can't move forward and drive change if we don't understand what we need to change. And at some point, we need to be in the conversation. And as leaders, you need to be willing to be vulnerable. You need to be willing to learn, reflect, and ask. And in that, you may make some mistakes. But if you're coming through a position of strong values with intent to understand, to drive change, I've had many conversations where I go away, learn, understand, clear on what we need to do as an organization. And I wouldn't be where I am today in understanding what Lululemon needs to do both inside and outside the organization if I didn't open up to that vulnerability to start with the conversation. And I just encourage any leader to have the confidence to go forward and be vulnerable, to be in conversation. It's the only way to authentically move forward for yourself and the organization to drive true change.
And Calvin, before I let you go, there's a question of whether the impulse that spurred through corporate America last year of some of these new awarenesses of racial inequality and of income inequality and some of the other specific hot topics that were spurred by the pandemic, that it will fade away, that it was a fad, and that all of the commitments were a one-time thing to pay lip service to a very difficult issue. Do you think that this time is different, that it's not just trying to paper over certain issues with a certain check, but that there will actually be lasting change?
I can speak for Lululemon. I absolutely at Lululemon, these are long-term, indefinite driving initiatives. These commitments that we've established, who we want to be as a culture, the notion of inclusiveness, and reaching out in the communities and both internally. These are commitments that are everlasting and will always be, and they're not fad. So from a Lululemon perspective, absolutely. In a lot of ways, 2020 opened up the opportunity to have these land in a different way than the conversation was landing before. And there's a number of reasons why that's the case, but the reality is they have. We are where we are, and I feel we're going to be much better. I know as an organization as a result of having them and being in the work, and absolutely for us in the leadership and at Lululemon, these are ongoing, lasting commitments, and we're excited about the future and how we will be an even stronger organization as a result of 2020 and where we are today.
Calvin McDonald, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your insights, and good luck getting back to your next Ironman competition, as well as driving the company forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.